Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be with you.
Great to have you here. I've followed you for quite a long time. I feel like I know you, although this is our first time actually interacting.
It
From all the
is.
interviews that I've watched and books of yours that I read,
Ah,
I feel like I do know you. So
thank you.
let's dive right in. I mean, you have so much great content out there, but it really centers around one idea and something that I saw pinned on your Twitter profile. This is the tweet that's pinned on for the listeners. This is what's pinned on Bob's profile. This is the tweet. It says, "The single greatest people skill is a highly developed and authentic interest in the other person." Can you tell us about that, Bob?
Yeah, this is something that while he never told me directly, it's based on observing my dad, who to me is, the single greatest, when it comes to people skills that I've ever seen. And and what I had always noticed about him, what he did was just, and for him it was very natural, it's not that I believe in the natural. Most things aren't natural. We have an inclination to be a certain way, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of practice and study and so forth. But this just happens to be a gift that my dad had, and that is to really want to make other people feel genuinely good about themselves, to bring out the best in others. And so while he never told me that's a great people skill to have, I just watched him do it. He was always, so it didn't matter who he was speaking with, he would ask questions, he would listen, and he was genuinely interested in them. And people just responded to him in a way that I have never seen with with anyone else. So that's really what the quote is about.
You read a book like How to Win Friends and
Oh,
Influence People, and you read that, right? You read that, and
great.
I don't know about you, but I feel like when I read that book, that was one of the most transformational books for me that I've
Mhm.
ever read. And you hear about a skill like this, like developing this authentic interest in other people and how valuable that is. It's almost intuitive, but we feel like it's the opposite. Let me share a quick story, and then I'd love to hear your feedback on this. Like, I remember sort of later in my college years and after college thinking like, in order for me to be interesting, in order for me to really make connections with people, I have to be able to talk. I have to be able to tell them stories and create conversation. And it's the opposite. It's, well, you create conversation by being authentically and genuinely interested in the other person. And if that isn't natural to you, finding that piece of you that is genuinely interested in watering that, growing that, focusing on that. And but again, it feels intuitive once you read it. You go, ah, okay, that totally makes sense. I've been doing the opposite my whole life. Why is it? Why is it that that is kind of intuitive, but we do the opposite?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit it right on the head on a couple of different levels. One is that, it seems counterintuitive because as human beings, we're basically programmed with self-interest, right? I mean, that just really, and I tell people, don't deny your self-interest because we're then denying human nature. And successful people live in truths. They operate from a viewpoint that, yes, in the context, I want to know the truth, I want to understand the truth, I want to deal with the truth. Now they don't let the truth, or they don't let the laws of nature, whether or the laws of human nature, the laws of, they don't let that stop them, but first they understand them, and then from there they work within the proper context to advance themselves and to advance others. So I say, don't deny your self-interest, just suspend your self-interest. Okay. And you can understand, if from a self-interested viewpoint, you can understand that that suspending your self-interest and putting your focus on the other person, why that will actually be beneficial to you as well. And I've often said to audiences that, I've said, have you ever been in a conversation with someone who let you do practically all the talking? And people say, yeah, I mean, probably not too often, but every so often there's someone like, I said, didn't you come away from that conversation saying to yourself, wow, what a fascinating conversationalist that person is, right? And it gets in, that's human nature. They let us talk. They're and we can sense they're truly interested in us. They're a great conversationalist. We love them. We want right. And so
Yep.
so again, it's understanding how these things work. But the key is that you really have to authentically be interested. So now I love what you said. Well, what if I'm not though? Then find something to be. Find something to be. Find one area, one just small area and be really interested in that. And as we know, action precedes feeling. People think, you have to feel a way in order to, no, action precedes feeling. And so be interested. And if you have to act into, okay, that's okay. We can deal with that because that's going to turn into being interested. And then, as you mentioned, then that's going to expand. And then all of a sudden you find, wow, I really am interested, and people are responding in a way that makes me feel great. Right. And I even more want to be interested. So, sure.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about having that conversation where somebody else does all the talking. I remember I used to be a major gift officer fundraiser in the University of Virginia athletics department. I remember one conversation specifically, but this happened quite a bit. But one gentleman who it was the first time I'd ever met him, and we spent probably an hour and a half in his office talking, and it was me asking questions and being genuinely interested, and I truly was.
Hmm.
But he did all of the talking. I mean, I did almost none of the talking. He didn't know anything about me. By the end of the conversation, I knew everything about him,
Right.
about his family, his kids, his job, his lake house, all of this stuff. He knew nothing about me. And at the end of the conversation, he expressed such gratitude and how great he felt about our conversation. And man,
Right.
I really connected with you, Jim. I'm thinking, I connected with you, and maybe he did. He felt that connection. We had that genuine. I really actually enjoyed the conversation because I was genuinely interested, but he knew nothing about me.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and there's a very important lesson in here too, I think. And that is people will say, well, but shouldn't he also have done the same thing? Well, whether he should or shouldn't, that's not the point. It's incumbent upon the communicator to communicate. And of course, we communicate by asking questions and listening. That's the truest form, the highest form of communication. So we can say, yeah, well, it should be this or it should be that, but now let's deal in truth, right? It usually isn't. It's going to be up to us to inspire that conversation in the way that you did.
Yeah, and it's like taking 100% responsibility of
Yes.
your side of the conversation, of your part of the relationship. Like relationships are 50-50. Well, you kind of have to take 100%
That
responsibility
make it
because if you
100. Exactly.
yeah, if you expect the other person to step up and do their 50, well, they may not take responsibility
And
for
they may not,
100%
right?
of it. Yeah. And this concept
Yeah. Great
is
point.
really the basis of the go-giver, right? I mean, this concept of being genuinely interested in other people, supporting other people. For those who haven't read the book or don't know about the Go-Giver book and in the series of books now, can you give them sort of the underlying concept of the book?
Yeah. Yeah, and these are 3 of the 4 books in the series are parables. So they're fictional stories based on universal laws and principles, of course, but, co-authored with John David Mann, who I believe, by the way, lived in Charlottesville, where you are for a while.
Oh, is
I
that
was just
right?
thinking that because we're talking about, yeah, Charlottesville earlier. But, John's a brilliant author and a writer. I'm more of a how-to guy. I'm step 1, step 2, step 3, and so, we collaborated on this, but the storytelling aspect, man, that is John. He's great. But the basic premise of the book, of all of them really, but of the first one especially, is that shifting your focus, and this is really where it begins, it's shifting your focus from getting to giving. Now, when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing immense value to others, understanding that doing so is not only a more fulfilling way of conducting business, it's the most financially profitable way as well. And not for some woo woo way out there, magical, mystical reasons. Oh, just do good. No, no, nothing like that at all. It's actually very rational when you think about it. When you're that person who can take your focus off yourself and place it on discovering what that other person needs, wants, desires, on what challenges they have that they need help getting past, on how to do things in a certain way that will make them happier, more fulfilled, what have you. People feel good about you. People want to get to know you. They like you. They trust you. They want to be in relationship with you. They want to do business with you. They want to tell others all about you. So it's that shift of focus that again, we're acting congruently with human nature. And I often, again, I'll say, one of the first things when I speak to a sales group is that nobody's going to buy from you because you have a quota to meet, right? They're not going to buy from you because you need the money or even because you're a really nice person. They're going to buy from you because they believe that they will be better off by doing so than by not doing so. And in the basically free market economy in which we live, and when I say free market, I simply mean no one's forced to do business with anyone else. That's the only reason they should buy from you or from me or from anyone else. And this is great though, because it means that that entrepreneur or salesperson who will really place their focus on bringing immense value to another human being, that's the person who's much more likely to bring in that business.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a matter of connecting with that person and thinking about that person. And the listener might be sitting here going, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea, Bob, but in practice, like how much do I give? Like if I just keep on giving, uh do I give away my business? Do I give away my money? Do I like is this all about giving or is this about at some level what you get back from that too?"
Sure. Well, law number 5, of course, is the law of receptivity. So, which is covered there, and that's important. It's understanding that we breathe out, but we also have to breathe in. Right? We breathe out, which is giving or giving of value. We also um, breathe in. We breathe out carbon dioxide, breathe in oxygen. But let's go back to that for a second, because I think the question itself is very important. And we say, how much do we give? And again, when we look at it within the context giving, which is focusing on providing value to another human being, okay, there's nothing about being a go giver that is congruent with being anyone's doormat or a martyr or self-sacrificial or being taken advantage of. Nothing like that. It's just understanding again that to the degree that you're able to communicate value to another human being, that's the degree that they are going to want to do business with you. And in the again, in a market-based environment, that value for value exchange is a product or service in exchange for financial. So so the first law, let's as an example, the first law is the law of value, which says your true worth in the business sense, your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment. Now, when you first hear that, it's sort of counterintuitive. Give more in value than I take in payment. Uh, I mean, that sounds like a recipe for bankruptcy. So we have to simply understand, Jim, the difference between price and value. See, price is a dollar amount. It's a dollar figure. It's finite. It is what it is. Value, on the other hand, is the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about this thing, this product, service, concept, idea, what have you, that brings so much worth or value to another person that they will willingly exchange their money for this and be ecstatic that they did, while you make a very healthy profit. I often give, just as a very quick example, because I think it's very easy to make the point with, that if you were to hire an accountant to do your taxes and she charged you $1,000, that's her fee. Literally, her price is $1,000. But what value does she give you in exchange? Well, she saves you well over $5,000 in taxes. She saves you countless hours, which free you up to do what you can more productively do. She provides you and your family with the security and the peace of mind of knowing it was done correctly. So what she did was she gave you well over $5,000 in value in exchange for $1,000 fee or price. She gave you she gave you more in value than she took in payment. You feel great about it, but she made a very healthy profit because for her, it was worth it to exchange her time, her energy, her knowledge, her wisdom in exchange for $1,000. Okay. And maybe 900 of that was profit, and that works out for her. And I remember one of my heroes, Harry Brown, first explaining this. He said, in any free market based exchange, again, willingly, people willingly exchanging with one another, in any free market based exchange, there are always two profits: the buyer profits and the seller profits, because each of them come away better off afterwards than they were beforehand. She gave a lot of value. Okay. And that was just the intrinsic value. Never mind how she made you feel, how great her staff was to work with, and how, you know what I'm saying? And everything that was
Yeah.
so so indeed, how much do you give? You give as much as you can in order to make that experience just fantastic for your customers and clients. But you're also receiving very well, also.
And that gets into the law of compensation. We're going to hold on to that for just a second because I want to make a comment on what you said, Bob. I was watching a video just yesterday by a master marketer named Frank Kern. And Bob, you may have heard of him, but a lot of the
Sure.
listeners may not have. I'm in this world. Bob, you're in this world. And so Frank Kern and Russell Brunson, another just master marketer, these guys. And they were both very wealthy. They have done so well for themselves.
Sure.
They give so much value in advance. They give so much away for
Right.
free that you want to give them your money. You want to pay for more. You want to sign up for their programs and their courses and their software, et cetera, because they build up so much goodwill. And in this talk that was given by Frank Kern, he actually said this. I mean, he said, essentially, I make so much money and I am so successful at what I do, and you can be too if you're willing to build up that goodwill in advance before you try to make the sale. And if you can give, the more you can give in value, that doesn't mean giving 40 hours of volunteering for 40 hours a week. That's not necessarily how the value. That's great. You can volunteer for some organization for 40 hours a week, but you're not going to be able to put food on the table. But how else can you provide value? So, with that said, and by the way, the last comment I want to make to the listeners before I ask you another question here, Bob, is this: it doesn't matter if you're in marketing. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant, like the example that Bob just gave. It doesn't matter what position you're in life. Maybe you're a teacher, maybe you're a coach, maybe you're a parent. Like, how can you think about authentically caring for the other person and giving value? And when you really start going down this path, you can be creative, and it gets
Oh, yeah.
kind of exciting to find different ways to give and to support. And that might be
Mhm.
connecting people, that might be writing a free white paper, it might be checking in on somebody when they need checked in on, right? It's
Right.
building those relationships, and it gets kind of fun when you start thinking about different ways you can add
Absolutely. It's
value.
limited only by, by one's imagination.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And I'll say this, Bob, like, you are so approachable and so available. Like, you live this. Like, you
Thank you.
live this. I mean, you can see it in your very being. Like, in this interview, it comes across. And every other
Okay.
interview that I've watched with you
Thank
and
you.
listened to, like, this comes from your heart, and you can see this. And as a result, you've been very successful and you've been compensated well for it. So let's get into that law, the law of compensation.
Yeah, and thank you for those kind words. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Law of compensation simply says that your income is determined by how many people you serve and how well you serve them. So, where law number one says to give more in value than you take in payment, law number two tells us that the more people whose lives you touch with the exceptional value you provide, the more money with which you'll be rewarded. Let's go back to your accountant for a moment, Jim, if we can. She did a great job of giving you more in value than she took in payment. You feel great about her. You would probably do business with her again, and you'd most likely refer her to others. Well, her other clients feel the same way about her. So our accountant is very quickly amassing what we call an army of personal walking ambassadors. And as she continues to add that kind of exceptional value to the lives of more and more people, her income will continue to grow and grow. In the story, Nicole Martin, who was the CEO for that law, for that segment, explained to Joe that the law of value, it's the foundational principle, but it only represents your potential income. It's typically not enough to provide exceptional value to one person, right? Law number two is about the number of lives, the number of people you're able to impact with that exceptional value. Something that, Frank and Russell have also done
Yeah,
very well.
absolutely. Yep. Yep. Okay, so we covered the first law, the law of value, the second law, law of compensation, the third law of influence. Talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. The law of influence says your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Now, again, in the sounds all goody good, Bob, but is that really well? First of all, think about it. The greatest leaders, the top influencers, the highest money earning salespeople this is actually how they run their lives and conduct their businesses. They're always looking out for the interest of the other person. But I also want to go back to something that we just touched on earlier. That placing the other person's interest first doesn't mean you're a doormat. It doesn't mean you're a martyr. Okay, nothing like that. It's simply this: as Joe, the protege in the story, learned from several of the mentors, the golden rule of business, of sales certainly, is that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And there's no faster, more powerful, or more effective way to elicit those types of feelings in others than by, again, genuinely, right, moving from that I focus or me focus to an other focus, looking for ways to, as Sam, one of the mentors in the story, advised Joe, make your win all about the other person's win. And when you do this constantly and consistently, you build that what we call army of personal walking ambassadors, right? Who are out there and they have your back, and that's really, where it begins.
And for the listener, if this is new to you, this concept is new, or maybe you've heard it before, but you've not quite been able to consistently live it out, you've got to do things that will help bring this back to you, bring this top of mind so that tomorrow morning, after you listen to this today, and now tomorrow morning you wake up, you can't just go about your life with that hardwired, or at least that wiring of self-interest, which serves us well at times, right? Especially when we're running from a saber-toothed tiger. But
I was just going to say, and that's where it began. Exactly.
right, that's where it started. But how can you think about ways to incorporate this into your life? It may be just a reminder on your phone. It may be maybe listening to this episode once a week, or every day for 3 days, till this gets hardwired into you. Certainly buying Bob's books, following him on social media, because he's always, giving this stuff away for free, adding value there as well. So I want you to think about that before we go into the fourth law that Bob has here, that's in the Go Giver books, the law of authenticity. Tell
Yeah.
us about that.
Yeah. Well, this one says the most valuable gift you have to offer is yourself. And in the story, Deborah, who was the mentor in that for that section, she shared a lesson that she had learned in her sales career, and that was that all the skills in the world, the sales skills, technical skills, people skills, as important as they are indeed very, very important. They're also all for naught if you don't come at it from your true, authentic core. Now, when you do, when you, as we like to say, show up as yourself day after day, week after week, month after month, people feel comfortable with you. People feel safe with you. Why wouldn't they? They know who they're getting, right? And consistency. And again, back from the saber-toothed tiger days of our cave person ancestors, when they had to, every day was a matter of life and death, survival. So the world had to be consistent. They had to know what those sounds in the distance meant. They had to know what the bent twigs meant. They needed to know what those tracks in the mud meant, and they needed to mean the same thing every day, everywhere, right? So, and that's hardwired into us. And so we will not trust a person who's not consistent. And a big part of consistency is authenticity, right? It's being yourself, showing up the same way every time. And this is where people know you, they like you, they trust you, they're much more likely to do business with you. Here's the thing, Jim. I think what causes a lot of people to not show up authentically is not ill intent, not malintent, but that they don't have the self-confidence
Hmm.
to do so. Because let's face it, it's difficult to show up authentically when you don't think you have anything worthy of showing up authentically for. So it's imperative that we recognize and that we embrace our strengths, that value that we bring to the table. I think as human beings, we have two types of value. We have intrinsic value just by being here, by being human beings, we have value, but we also have what I call market value. And I define market value as that combination of strengths, traits, talents, and characteristics that allow a person to add value to the world, to the marketplace, to others in such a way that they will be compensated for it. And we all have these, what Mike Littman, I think, coined the term assets of value, right? But it's hard to see them because we're human beings and we're so emotionally close to ourselves. And we see us as we were 15 and 16 years old, right? And it's difficult to see that some of these great gifts that we have, that not everybody else has them, because as human beings we also see the world from our own unique viewpoint. So, and that's why it's so great to get with a coach like yourself. It's so great to get with people who can dispassionately help us recognize those strengths, right? And be able to work with them accordingly. Now, we also have to know our weaknesses. And I believe there are three types of weaknesses. There are the ones that we can totally ignore and disregard because they don't matter. There are there's another type of weaknesses. Those are the ones we need to mitigate so that they don't harm, okay? But then there are the weaknesses that we need to turn into strengths if we are going to have an opportunity to be our best authentic selves. It's I think some people I think they see authenticity as something other than what it is. Let me give you an example, if I may. It's the person who says, "Well, I have anger issues and I yell a lot. And if I were to act any differently, that wouldn't be authentic of me." Well, that's malarkey. That's hogwash. It simply means this person has an authentic problem that they need to authentically work on in order to improve themselves and become version, a higher, more effective version of their authentic selves. So we never want to mistake authenticity with staying where we are. No, we utilize authenticity in order to grow into our highest, most effective self.
Man, I want every listener to hit rewind on this episode and listen to the last couple of minutes of what Bob just said, because that is so true. And it's so hard because when we go on social media and we see everybody with the perfect family and the perfect hair and the perfect home and the perfect job, we go, oh man, what's wrong with me? But when you look at these people and you pull back the curtain, which I do on this podcast, and ask people about, tell me about a time when you, this superstar, this person that we hold in such high regard, tell us about a time when you failed. And when you go back to some of my podcast episodes, and for the listener, I'll have this in the action plan. I'm going to have links to a few other episodes that really relate to this authenticity topic. But there's one guy in particular, Steve Garland. He's a great friend of mine. He's the head wrestling coach at the University of Virginia, NCAA runner up, college wrestler. And this guy gave the best speech I've ever seen in my entire life. And I've had a lot of people tell me the same thing. But this guy was so genuinely authentic. I mean, raw. And it was so real. And it just makes made people like him, or I should say love him,
Yeah.
because of what he shared and the truth of what he shared. And everybody's sitting in the room kind of going like, yeah, I think the same thing, I feel the same thing, maybe I experienced some of the same thing, but I don't share it, but he does. He's so open about that, and he just really creates connection so quickly because he's so authentic. And so
Yeah.
I want the listeners to understand, like, pay attention to the next person you hear who's authentic, and pay attention to the feeling of what you said, Bob: know, like, and trust. How much you know them, like them, and trust them based on what they share with you authentically. And you will
Yeah.
see that trust meter goes up.
It's a great point.
Yeah. So, Bob, I want to turn this around a little bit, this part of the conversation, onto you. And we are out here in the world looking at a guy like Bob Burg, who's written all these amazing books, and he's worked with, so many, so many great companies, these top level companies, and you've had so much influence, and you've been so successful. A guy like Bob just doesn't fail. Apparently, from the outside looking in, we don't see the struggle, we don't see the adversity, we don't see the failure that got you here. So, can you share with us a time, a story, a moment where you failed, and because of that failure, maybe you felt that self-doubt, that little voice was chirping in your ear saying, I'm not good enough, and how you worked through that?
Well, you say a guy like Bob, did he have failures? A guy like Bob uh, had failures all the time and continues to. So that's the last, could you relate to a failure? Yeah. Can you relate to the last day it was sunny out? I mean, yeah, absolutely, of course. And I think most people will say the same thing. I think it's hard to get to a certain level of success without having a whole bunch of failures to build from, so long as you learn from those failures. And and I didn't always learn as quickly as I should have from those failures too. That to me, the worst failures are the ones you repeat. But but that happens as well. But just thinking of a time, and this is back in the, I think it was like I guess the late '90s, and this is when the internet was just kind of starting to really be a thing. Okay. And I had built up over the last 7 or 8 years, I guess, a really pretty successful speaking practice. I had learned the system for doing so. I'm a big believer in following, not trying to reinvent the wheel, but following a set. I define a system as simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles. The key being predictability. If it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then you know that you won't just need to do A and continue to do A and continue to do A. You'll eventually get the desired result of B. And it doesn't mean it's always easy and it doesn't mean it's always fast, but you get there if that's what you're doing. And I had followed a system. I'd learned how to do it, built up a nice practice, but very not technically oriented at all. And as this internet thing was really starting to take off, a lot more of my clients and the in the niches I was working, they were going, starting to do that, and many of the other speakers were. This is the speaking business that I had been in for a while, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want to really learn about technology. I didn't want to change. And it's interesting to me that in the personal development genre, which you and I are both involved with, and many of your listeners and viewers, there were certain there's a certain political correctness there that we're all supposed to buy into. And one of them is change is great. Embrace change. Change is wonderful. Well, the problem is I hate change.
So
Okay.
we all do.
Yeah, I want to learn something, get really proficient at it, and then just keep going. And I mean
Right.
that's just me. But and so what happened is, and I got a little, overconfident and said, I've built up this great business. I've got all these loyal, steady customers and clients and so forth, and I really don't have to. Well, yes, I did have to, but I didn't. And my business just fell. And I really had to start from scratch. And the failure, of course, was not recognizing there's a big difference between not wanting to change, which is fine, and not being willing to change. And That yeah, it said to me, Berg, you know, you ain't the big deal you think you are right now. So certainly a failure. So I had to
Yeah.
kind of come back, call an audible, and start working on that. And I'm still not a, you know, it's not like I'm a tech expert, but I surrounded myself, or not with lots of people. Well, I guess lots of people, but especially with someone who was very good at that. My business partner, Kathy Tajanel, who's brilliant. She is wonderful with technology, and she, you know, creates the context for me to be able to use it, understand it to the degree I need to, and and utilize it to my advantage, not as a detriment.
Well, I think this whole internet thing's just a fad, so you're
That's
probably
it.
did just the
Never
right
gonna,
route,
yeah,
so
right, never gonna take off.
it's not gonna take off. What about habits? My listeners like to know the habits of world-class performers. Is there some kind of habit, something that you do on a regular basis or that you've done over the years that you really feel like has helped set you apart and find success?
I think maybe there are a few things I do, not that it's anything anyone else doesn't do, but things that have worked for me. One is having a very deep understanding of my strengths and weaknesses, which we talked about before. Understanding, and remember, I one of the things about weaknesses I talked about, there are some you can ignore, some that you have to mitigate, and of course some you have to actually change. One of the biggest ones is mitigation. Okay, so for instance, on a personal level, I um, hate to work out. Okay, and I love to eat junk food. Now, when I was a young kid, I worked out even when I didn't want to, and I was a lot more disciplined as far as the foods I ate because I had a reason to want to look good. You know, the whole thing. As I get older, it's not as you know, that's not as big a deal to me. But it's something I had to mitigate. So what I've done for the last 10 years is I have a trainer. She comes to the house every single well, 5 mornings a week. Used to be six, now it's five. She works me out in the morning. She prepares all my meals for the day, healthy meals. I know exactly what I can have and what I can't have. So what I did is I created the environment for me to be healthy. Okay. So, and it's not that well, let's put it this way. I don't keep Oreo cookies in the house because they would be gone as soon as they were there, which doesn't mean I never have Oreo cookies. It means that if I'm going to, I have to make the effort to get in the car, to go to the store, to right, you know, and so forth. Um, so I've done this with a lot of areas in my life where I have set up um, an environment where it was easier for me to do the right thing than the wrong thing because frankly I didn't trust myself to not do the wrong thing. Right, I'd eat the Oreos if they were in the house. Okay, so you know, and I've done that in different business contexts and so forth. So that's one thing. I've been able to mitigate weaknesses through systems, if you will. Another thing is I'm a very avid reader. I'm always reading, always learning, always listening. And so I think that's been something that's helped me. And I have what has been said to me, a bias for action. So, in other words, when there's an idea, once I believe it's the right idea to apply, and it's not always the case, of course, we need to discern what is and what isn't. But once I believe an idea is the right way to go, I tend to apply it immediately. So I think those things have helped me, you know, in some significant ways.
Yeah, I believe so, man. Those are fantastic. Thank you for sharing, Bob. For the listener or viewer, that is, because we are recording this on video. For
Yeah.
anybody wanting to watch this, you can find the video of this as well on my YouTube channel. So check that out. But for the listener who is ready to take action, they want to move forward. They say, okay, I want to embrace this go giver mindset. What's an action item, something they can do like immediately, like the next 24 to 48 hours? Is there a concrete action item or a few things even, but even if it's just one thing that they can take action on in the next 24 to 48 hours, what would it be?
Oh, sure, and that's so important. You know, as you recall in the story, Pindar, the main mentor, made that a condition for mentoring Joe. He had to apply each law that very day, not think about doing it, not questioning whether it would work or not, but just do it. And it didn't have to be done perfectly. Remember for the one on serving a lot of people, he poured coffee for everyone on the 3rd floor. You know, I mean, that was just an action where you could serve a lot of people. So I would go from there and say, determine what you need to do to start applying this and do it. You know, you brought up a great point earlier about providing, just, you know, looking for ways to provide value to others. By all means, how can you do that? And it can be as simple as opening the door for someone. We know when they walk by, it can be as simple as, if you're crossing paths with someone, smiling at them first, rather than waiting for them to smile at you. It may be you see someone can use a certain connection, so you connect with them with a good person. Of course, when you make a connection, make sure you get permission first from the people you want to connect, so it's not just embarrassing people by, you know, connecting when they may not want to be, or causing them discomfort. But um, but you just ask yourself the question, how can I add value to this person's life? And then do it. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be particularly significant. It just needs to be some action on the idea.
Bob, after reading your books and listening to you and watching you and following you for so many years, it has been incredible to finally connect with you and do this interview. So
Oh,
thank you for making the time. Where can the listeners and viewers find you, follow you, buy your books, etc.?
probably the best place to go would be Burg, and that's burg.com. And on the site, they can find where they can read an excerpt or chapter of any of the books. There's a blog, there's videos, all sorts of fun resources. And if they scroll down to the bottom, they can find me on all the different social media platforms and connect with me there. You know, it's been great to speak with you, and of course, your reputation precedes itself, and it's great finally having an opportunity to meet you in person, quote unquote.
Sure. Likewise, likewise. Well, thank you, Bob. And for the listener, as always, take the time to get clear on your goals and embrace failure as a stepping stone on your path to success.